Hi, this video is a demo on creating Linework in Sketchbook Pro, a little bit of overpainting, some texture work in Photoshop, and a little bit of Illustrator at the end for stitching. So we're working with soft goods. So let's get started. Here I have a sketch page of some different bags, and I'm going to pull out one of these to work with for our demo. So I have a layer here of my sketch layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out one of these bags to use as an underlay. So I use my lasso tool here, and I just outline around that bag and hit Control C or Command C on Mac to copy. And I'm going to bring that into a new layer. So Control V to do that. So I'm going to try to hide the rest of this stuff. So I want to work with a pretty clean layer tree. So I just have my copied layer here, and I'm going to move that into the center of the page, and I'm going to make it bigger. And I don't really care if it gets too grainy right now, because this is just going to be used as an underlay. So I lower the opacity just to the point where I can see the line work. So that's pretty light. And just to clean this up a little bit, I'm going to use my eraser here, bring my pucks over so that I have a nice comfortable workspace. And with the hard eraser, I'm just going to get rid of some of this extra text. All right, so on a new layer, I'm going to use my pencil, and I have it at about size 4. Now that's going to change based on the resolution of your document. So I have it just standard 1920 by 1080. So if you guys have a higher resolution image, you might want to use a higher number size of your pencil. So I'm going to go around here and work with a black pencil here. So that's kind of what that looks like. And because it's soft goods, I'm going to let some of my spans drape a little bit. So I'm not going to go for totally rectilinear lines. And it also doesn't really matter too much where I begin. So I'm just going to choose this area down in the corner. I'm going to work around the form. So this is all going to be a fabric portion of the bag here. So it'd be pretty lightweight, which means a little bit more flex in the form. And this band here is going to be a little bit stiffer. So I'm going to show that it's getting stitched into this seam here by having a little bit bend in that line. And then it's going to be a little straighter across the span because that's a reinforcing piece of material. So I want to show that this is terminating into the edge of the bag. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space here. For maybe a double line to show that that's an additional panel. That's probably good. So we'll take a look. That's fine. And I'll move on to another part of the bag. So down here, I'm thinking this is going to be some kind of rubber skid. So this might be a little bit smoother because it's going to have some structure to it. So I let my lines have some of that flatter contour. Now this is relatively easy because my underlay, I made sure that I got my proportions and lines right in my underlay. So this step is a lot easier if you're working with a higher quality sketch underneath. Quality just meaning that the line work is where it should be. And I'm not really making too much up at this point, just doing a little bit of editing as the lines go in. So I'll have to do some erasing with these straps as I have those in the foreground, but I'm not going to worry about that yet because I can just use the eraser to do that. And what I'll probably do is work that in on a separate layer. So we'll put that off for now. All right. It's looking pretty good. This line looks a little off, so I'm going to try to resolve that in here. I could use the ruler to give myself a guide, just so I can line that up well. So perhaps that looks a little bit more correct. So I'll just put that in lightly and go ahead and sketch over that now. You'll notice I like to double line. This is something that I just carry over from working with traditional media on copy paper and ballpoint pen, which is how I typically like to sketch. You don't have to do that. I find it just gives you a little bit more of a consistent line. I'm going to move my zipper down a little bit. And for now, I'll just keep it simple like that. I can always go back and add more detail to this later. I've got a pull tab up here. So with this, I want to leave room for a little thickness on the edge. Maybe this has a little bit of a dip in the middle too, just to highlight that softness. And I'll pull this out in the shading. I don't have to have these lines perfect right now, but I'll just give it a suggestion of thickness. I have another reinforcing panel here. And I'll show that that gets bumped out as it comes over the strap. Maybe there's some rivets on this patch here. All right, I'll move on to adding a little bit more detail here. I've got a zipper underneath and maybe some hardware elements that act to frame out that zipper. I might suggest a contour line. All right. Let's do this top panel here. So that could be coming down into the seam and maybe sagging a little bit in the middle. And we may not see the other side of that because of the perspective. So I might leave that like that. Maybe just some extra lines to create some interest. I want this to show a little bit of thickness too. So I'll add a thinner line underneath here. So now I can see the top face of that band. And another zipper here. It's okay to have a little wobble on these lines just to highlight the drape of the material. And I'll throw in another zipper here. I want to just check the other zipper so I get the scale right. So I want this in my window when I'm putting this on. So that looks like it's about that size. It's maybe a little long, so let's just chop off a bit there. All right, that looks good. And then we'll do the same over here. Okay, so now the straps. So I'll make a new layer because straps are in the foreground. This makes it easy to then go back to this layer and erase out some of these lines. So I'm actually going to increase the opacity of my underlay a bit. So I have a better visual on the straps. And I'll just start working my way around here. So for this area, because these lines have a bit of an S-curve, this could be a challenging area. So I'm going to do a like shadow line here. Just trying to train my arm to make this curve. So that looks pretty good. Now it'd be really hard for me to do this again right next to it. So what I'm going to do instead is get maybe half of the way there and see if I can do the line in 2 segments or 3 segments. It's much easier to do that if you simplify the line a bit. There we go. All right. Oops. So I go darken the lower line a little bit more. And then on the other side of the strap, it's not as crucial as this is a pure offset just because of the distance. So I might just take a few attempts, and that one looks pretty good. All right, so I'll go to the other side. Same thing. That looks pretty good. And I'll just break this up into segments as well. All right, that first one looks pretty good. Use a tiny eraser just to give myself a little opening there. Go back to my pencil. And that looks pretty good. Let's just join those two lines. All right. That looks good. And we'll go with that. Oops. All right, so I've got my strap in there. I've got these smaller handles in here and a leather band in the middle. So I'll use my best guess here as to what these lines are doing. And maybe keep this a little bit looser. Leather's pretty rigid, so these lines might be pretty straight. And it was usually pretty thick as well, so I'll give myself some thickness there. Check my work. That looks pretty good. I'll do a little shaping with my eraser just to edit this a bit. That looks all right. Maybe there's a clasp or button on that in a prominent location, so that looks pretty good. And let's get these straps in here. That side looks a little thicker than the front side, so I'm just going to go back and thin that up a bit. And add some of that flare back to that side of the strap. It can sometimes be difficult to see with these lines. So what we can do is go to our other layer and then use our eraser and the boundaries of the lines that we just put in to clean this up. That's looking pretty good. And let's quickly do the other side. So go back to that strap layer. Looks good. We need to do the bottom of the leather wrap. So that looks pretty good. And lastly, let's see, coming across the bag here, I would expect this strap to come up somewhere around here. Let's move that over just slightly. Yeah, right around there. That looks good. Okay, we have one extra tab over here to consider. So this might be the tag that's on this panel of the zipper. So we'll maybe make an edit on our underlay here. And sketch that in. Okay. And use our eraser just to get rid of that line there. All right, that looks like that's it for line work. Last thing I'll do is just merge down these layers. I'll double check to make sure all of these lines are erased in here. So I'm back on my original layer, and that looks good. Just checking all those straps. All right, I can hide my underlay, and we'll call that good for line work. I'll merge that together so all of my line work is on the same layer. And I could save out a version of that for the next stage.